Hi, I am M. Jagadish, Associate Professor in CSC Department. Please watch my videos, like and share my videos, and subscribe my channel. Hello. Here we discuss about constructors. What actually constructor means? What is the usage of the constructor? Why we have to use the constructors? All these things we'll discuss. First of all, what is mean by a constructor? In the previous sessions, we saw some programs where we used a special function, and that special function is nothing but normal member function, but the name of the member function is similar to the class name. We already executed those programs. There, in that, we specify that it is normally a function, but here now it is the time to discuss about that type of functions, and those types of functions are nothing but constructors. They can call as constructors. Now, what is mean by a constructor? Constructor is nothing but simply a member function. How we execute and how we declare or how we define the normal member functions in the class. Similarly, here we just go to define the member function, but we can call that member function as a constructor. Then we can call that member function as a constructor means whenever the member function name is the same as its class name. If both the member function name and the class name is the same, then we can call that particular function is nothing but a constructor. Basically, the constructor's main purpose is to initialize the objects of the class. To initialize the objects of the class, we just go to use the constructors. Then what is the necessity to take the step to initialize the objects of the class? Why we just go to do, or why we just go to use the constructor means basically when we are using a constructor, in the class, and when we are creating the object of that class, when we just go to create the object of the class, automatically it passes or it initializes the values of the objects to the member function. Simply at the time of creation of the object only, it initializes the values. That is the main thing of the constructors. Now look at this, how we just go to pass or how we just go to initialize the values of the objects to a member function. We'll discuss in detail about all these constructors. Now look at this particular example. Here we just go to explain the constructors with an example. Now here I am defining a class with a keyword class, and the name of the class is nothing but student. I am defining a constructor class student. Now in this I just go to use two normal data members, roll number and marks with the data type int and floats, and come to the public section. In the public section, here I am defining a constructor. Observe, here I am defining a constructor. Now what is a constructor means? The constructor is nothing but a normal member function, but it has the same name of class name. Look at this. Both the class name and the function name is the same, student. Here I have to specify a small s, or else here I have to specify a capital S. So both the names must be the same. Now define the constructor, open the brace. Here I simply initialize the value 0 to roll number and 0.0 to marks. Then close the definition of the constructor and then close the class. Thereby the class definition is complete. Now look at the next one. Now we just go to execute the programs. This is simply a constructor. Now before going to specify all these things, now we look at the different types of constructors, what actually it is and how we just go to work with the different types of the constructors. Now look at here, we just go to specify the different types of the constructors. Now there are three types of the constructors. One is nothing but the default constructor, and one more is nothing but the parameterized constructor, and at last is nothing but copy constructor. Now we'll go one by one. What is mean by a default constructor, parameterized, and copy constructor? Practically, the default constructor is nothing but a constructor where we cannot pass any arguments to the constructor, the default constructor. And one more thing, when we are working with the default constructor, when we specify the default constructor, for every class, there must be a one constructor is there implicitly, which we can call as a default constructor. Even if we are not defining, we are not declaring or defining any default constructor, but practically, whenever the object creates to the class, the default constructor will execute. The default constructor will execute. Apart from the default constructor, here we are specifying parameterized constructor, means where we are passing the parameters. We are passing the parameters to a constructor, that is nothing but parameterized constructor. And here one more, that is nothing but copy constructor. Copy constructor means here in this we are copying the values of one object to the another object. The values of one object to the another object is nothing but copy constructor. Now we'll go in depth about one by one. Whatever we discussed, those are nothing but like this. A default constructor, where in this we don't have any arguments, we are not passing any parameters, is called default constructor. Even if you are not to declare a constructor or a destructor, the compiler makes one for you, which I specified. Even if you are not created or if you are not defined any constructor, then automatically whenever the object creates, the compiler will generate the constructor. And come to the next one, parameters, which I recently specified. A constructor that accepts the parameters is nothing but parameterized constructor. If we are passing the parameters to a constructor, which we can call as parameterized constructor. Now, look here the next one. I will go with the example. Observe clearly here. I just go to explain the constructor concepts by means of example. Now, here I am defining a class with the keyword class, and the name of the class is nothing but rectangle. In the private section, I specify two data members, length and breadth. And in the public section, simply I am defining the rectangle constructor. Now look at this. The class name is rectangle and the function name is also a rectangle. When both the class name and function name are same, then we can call that is nothing but constructor. Now in this constructor, simply specify one cout statement where the cout is going to print I am in the constructor. Then again, here I just go to specify that I am assigning the value 10.0 to length and then 20.5 to breadth. Simply I am assigning the values to length and breadth. Thereby constructor closes. And again, simply define one normal member function which returns a float data type. When it is returning a float data type, then definitely we have to specify a return statement. We have to specify a return statement. So return length into breadth. So that is 10.0 into 20.5. So that value will be returned. And then close the member function. Then close the class. Now we'll go to execute this program by defining main function. Now look at this particular one here. I simply define the main function CLRS here, which is going to clear your screen. Then here I am creating the object RECT rect. Now I am creating the object rect for a class rectangle. Now cout the area of rectangle with the default parameters which is going to print the information on the output screen. Remember, when I just go to create the object, immediately it executes the default constructor. When I create the object, it executes the default constructor. Now, what is the default constructor in the class? Means the default constructor is nothing but this one. This is the default constructor. Observe clearly, where the values will be assigned to length and breadth. So the length value is 10.0 and breadth value is 20.5. These values will be assigned to length and breadth. Then after that, whenever object creation completed, the values will be assigned. Then it executes the next statement. Here the next statement is nothing but cout. Whatever the information that is there in the double quotation marks, that information will be displayed on the screen. After that, it has to print rect dot area. Area is nothing but a normal member function. So when you are going to execute or invoke the normal member function, we have to use the object and dot operator. So rect is the object, rect dot area, which is going to calculate the value of length into breadth. So and so value will be calculated, and then next close the main program. So this is the way how we just go to execute the default constructor. The default constructor. Now look at this one more. Copy constructor. So now here I just go to copy the values of one object to the values of another object. So when we just go to copy the values of one object to the values of another object is nothing but copy constructor. Now here I am copying the value of existing object to a new object. When I go and do this one means we can call it is nothing but a copy constructor. A copy constructor is nothing but the form, it is in the form class name, that is nothing but ampersand. And it is going to initialize the values of one class or one object to the another object. Now look at this particular one, how we are going to achieve the copy constructor means. Now observe clearly. Here I am defining a